Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast, everybody. I'm excited to be here again with you this week, still continuing our series on the Enneagram. And as you know by now, if you've been listening to the podcast for the last couple of weeks, this is all leading up to the workshop that I'm leading on April 26th here in Denver, in person, live in the flesh, which is called the Living Enneagram, Your Personal Roadmap. And if you haven't already enrolled in that workshop and you live in the Denver area, what in the heck? Hurry it up. I am so excited to see you on the 26th. I can't even tell you all of the goodness that I have planned for you. But if you are interested in learning what your type is, if you are interested in exploring your type and learning from your type and maybe even expanding outside of your type and looking at the Enneagram as a whole and your growth journey, these are all the things that we are going to be touching on during that morning. And also snacks, because you got to have food. And especially this workshop is happening right over the breakfast/brunchy hour. I got to give you guys some delicious goodies to keep you interested and paying attention while I'm teaching and we're doing all our work together. So if you have any questions about this, if you are ready to enroll, if you want to learn more, go to the website. It's bit.ly/living Enneagram. I can't wait to see you there. And today, what we're going to dive into with the Enneagram, what's interesting is as I've been kind of recording these episodes and laying out the foundation of what I want to talk about in these podcasts, I'm realizing like I'm able to go so much deeper or further in these episodes than we probably will be able to go in the workshop in a crazy way, because I'm able to talk about a lot of the sort of what I consider the double black diamond stuff of the Enneagram. And that today is a great example of that. We're talking about um the stances of the Enneagram, or sometimes those are illuminated through the study of what's called the Hornevian groups. And I'll talk to you about what all that means and what Hornevian means. Oh my gosh, what a weird word. We're going to talk about all of that stuff. Well, we're probably only going to maybe briefly touch on that in the workshop, because the workshop is designed to go deep on our types and our identities and our personality constructs. And you can't go deep and shallow, and you can't have depth and a narrow focus and have shallow, broad focus at the same time. So if you come to the workshop and you're listening to these podcast episodes, you're getting the best of both worlds, right? You're getting that like broad overview through the podcast episodes, and then you're getting deep into this focused study and exploration and the workshop. So today we're going to talk about that. And I want you to think about this in terms of, how do you get what you want out of life? How do you go about getting stuff from the situations that you're in and the people that you're interacting with? So in a past episode, I talked about the triadic structure of the Enneagram, the head center, the heart center, and the body center, those that thinking, feeling, and intuition and gut centers of intelligence and ways of being. And that way of looking at the Enneagram teaches us a little bit about, what do people want? When we look at the stances, we're talk about how they get what they want, right? So what those triads show us is that, the head center is looking for security. The heart center is looking for attention or recognition. And the gut center is looking for control and autonomy. Those are the things that the triads want, right? So the triads show us what each type wants. the Hornevian groups show how each type achieves what they want. And so today, when we're going through this podcast, I want you to think about like, well, how do I go about getting what I want? And it sometimes we talk about this stuff, it's really from an energetic standpoint. So I actually want to give you a really concrete example for my confession today to help this really, um, you know, land and hit home for you. So a lot of people are surprised when after they've met me, when I talk about my relationship with my mom, because the way I show up in my relationship with my mom is completely different than how I show up in almost every other relationship. And so people are always surprised. In general, I seem like a pretty strong, confident person. I'm relatively comfortable speaking my mind and going against the grain and all of these things because I'm really following this like strong inner guidance that I have about what's right for me and what my life is supposed to look like because I'm a one. Well, in my relationship with my mom, it's totally different. And I know that there's so many people out there who can relate to, like, oh, you're this kind of a person when you're on your own. And as soon as you get back with your family of origin, or once you get back into your like parent child relationship with a parent, it all goes out the window. We like just turn right back into like the little kids that we used to be. That definitely happens to me. And it's one of the biggest areas where you can see my stance come up in like very clear ways. So as a one, my stance is called the compliant stance or the um dutiful stance, or it's called also the toward stance. So the way that I get what I want in this world is by following the rules and trying to be compliant and cooperative and sort of meet either the situation I'm in or the person I'm interacting with in this sort of like, let's come up with a compromise. Let's find the win-win. Let's really sort of collaborate on something because I want to, I want to get what I want, which as a gut type is control and autonomy. I want to get that, but I want to get it in a way that's about sort of like being good and compliant and dutiful and following the rules and all that stuff. And nowhere is that more apparent than in my relationship with my mom. So, I could almost tell it to you even more so in my sort of inner experience of my relationship with my mom, which is trying to thread a needle where it's like, I get what I want, but I'm not breaking any rules. I get what I want, but I'm not upsetting my mom. I get what I want, but I'm doing it in a way that's like above reproach. And it is impossible, by the way. Every type finds themselves in their own impossible situations, but especially in my relationship with my mom, who is an Enneagram type 8. Holy cow, it's very tricky to be in a relationship with someone who's called the challenger or the controller, which is what an 8 is, as someone who is just trying so desperately to carve out my own identity, my own autonomy, my own control without poking the bear, without upsetting the apple cart. And it definitely has reared its head more and more clearly over the last couple of years, because a few years ago my husband and I purchased my grandmother's home when she passed away, and we've made it sort of a family gathering place, but it's also our house. And that is really tricky for my mom to be in that situation where she is not in control and it's not her house. And in the summertime, these like sort of interpersonal dynamics turn into real fireworks sometimes, because we all are in this beautiful lake house and in northern Michigan together for like a month, sometimes almost 2 months, cohabitating. And can you imagine? I've just anyone out there, it doesn't matter what your type is or what kind of personality you have or what kind of personality your parents have. Just imagine living with your parents for 2 months every summer. It is a big challenge. And one of the things that is super challenging for me is trying to thread that needle. And we have had so many of these moments of just real conflict because of it. My mom has a very specific idea of how she wants things to be, and it seems really comfortable and important to her to go for those things. And sometimes it feels like you're getting stomped on in that process, but it's my mom. And so I desperately want to like be a good girl. I want to be a good daughter at the same time that I'm like, hey, wait a second. Like, this is my house and I'm actually in charge. And so it's very, very strange dynamic. And I think as we go through these stances today in the workshop, or sorry, in this episode, you are going to see even more. And I'm going to kind of continue. I've like set the stage for you of what's going on as you learn more about the stances and the way that each type tries to get what they want, the more that you are going to sort of see. And I'll continue to give you examples of how this has played out on that stage for me with my mom. So it's a great example of, you know, a lot of times when people talk about the stances, they really talk about them. They're social stances. So we talk about them in terms of how we relate to the people around us or how we interact with people around us, how we get our needs met in our relationships. But it's also important to know that most people engage with circumstances and situations in those similar ways. It's almost like our minds see either people or situations as just obstacles that we need to overcome to get to where we want to go. And that gets into a whole nother world of study that is the anatomy of peace. And that's a conversation for a whole nother day. If you decide to come to the retreat this fall, which is not to muddy the waters, but I'll tell you the dates of the retreat as well, starts on October 9th. We're going to be talking about the anatomy of peace and the juxtaposition of the Enneagram with the anatomy of peace. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. Let's talk about these stances, and you're going to see how you probably will almost be able to predict some of the examples I'm going to give you of stuff happening between me and my mom. So the reason why these groups or these stances are called the Hornevian groups is because um, it really is named after a psychologist named Karen Horney, who really identified that there are three primary ways we interact with others or with situations to meet our needs and to soothe our inner conflict. Now, Karen Horney did not actually link her Hornevian model to the Enneagram. That's something that happened later because as we're dealing with typologies, the teachers of the Enneagram quickly saw how this model fit with the Enneagram. And so that's how we kind of came up with this wacky word Hornevian, and the Hornevian groups were sort of established. And it really just is a way of, like I said before, juxtaposing those triads, the head, the heart, and the gut triads, which talks about what the types in each group want, with how they get what they want. And that's where that Hornevian group. So in each triad, you're going to see that there's a member of each Hornevian group. And you don't need to remember that or take it with you. It's just a really kind of cool little inside baseball, sort of geeking out level of Enneagram study. But really, what's most important about what we're talking today is how we react to people and situations in order to meet our own needs. Why are you showing up in your relationships the way that you do? And why maybe do you feel kind of stuck in some of your relationships? And think about this in terms of maybe partnerships that you might be in, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your parents. Like I'm using this example today. So much of why we find ourselves in the situations we find ourselves in or in the relationship dynamics we find ourselves in is explained by these stances. So in order to meet our own needs, our needs for autonomy and control, if we're in that gut triad, our need for identity and attention if we're in the heart triad, or the need for security and safety if we're in the thinking triad, in order to meet those needs, there are sort of three main ways that people go about that. The first one of those is called the toward stance, or sometimes called the compliant or the dutiful stance. And that's the stance that I am in as a one. The other two numbers that are in that stance are the 2 and the 6. And the types that are in that toward stance, they try to earn what they want. And I'm going to get deeper into this in a minute, but I'm going to kind of go through all the stances first in a general way. So that toward or dutiful stance tries to get what they want by earning it. The second stance I'm going to talk about is called the away or withdrawn stance, and types 4, 5, and 9 are in this group. The away or withdrawn stance tries to get what they want by reflecting. They take a step back, they withdraw, and they reflect on the situation, and that's how they get what they want. The third stance is that against, or sometimes called the at stance, sometimes called the assertive stance, sometimes called the aggressive stance. These numbers, 7, 8, and 3, try to get what they want by taking it or going after it. So we have these three strategies: the earn what I want, the reflect on what I want, or the take what I want. Those are the three ways in which people try to get their needs met. So now let's go into that a little bit even more deeply. Let's go into that toward stance, the stance that tries to earn what they want. We all do it in slightly different ways, but it's always about a strategy that is toward the people or the situation that we're in. That sort of like co-creation idea. Ones, which is my type, the way that we do that is by following the rules. We follow the rules in order to earn control, autonomy, independence. Twos try to earn what they want, which is attention, by loving and caring for the people around them. Or in a social situation, it might be they love and care for the collective that they're in or the situation that they're in. So two's strategy is love and care. One strategy is following the rules. Two strategy is loving and caring. Six's strategy is loyalty. To be loyal, now they get security. The more loyal they are to a group or a person, the more secure they feel, right? So all three types have different strategies and they have different things they want, but overall, they are all trying to earn what they want, either through rule following, through loving and caring, or through loyalty. And so you can see why this stance is called the toward stance, the dutiful stance, the compliant stance. They are trying to sort of work with the situation they're in to get what they want. Excuse me. I'm a human being. Sometimes I have to cough. Whoopsies. Let's talk about the away stance or that withdrawing stance, the 4, 5, and 9. This stance, it's kind of like, how does this get what you want? Like when I was studying the Enneagram, the away stance was the one that I had the hardest time seeing. Well, how is this a strategy to get anything if you're just withdrawing, right? If you're just removing yourself from the situation, how does that actually get you anything? It took me a long time to understand how that worked. But the way I think about it is that the strategy of that away or withdrawn group is to reflect and contemplate and use that strategy and to eventually get what they want. So fours withdraw into their sort of their idealized like special self to get attention. They tend to feel that they have nothing in common with the things around them, but as they withdraw, they hope that by withdrawing they'll be noticed. And I bet you know someone in your life like this who maybe is sort of stepping away from the group, and by stepping away, people notice that they've stepped away, and somehow the attention goes back onto them, even though they're leaving. It's kind of a backward strategy, but it does work, right? It's actually effective. Withdraw to get attention. Interesting, right? And not only do they withdraw in the sense of like, I'm leaving this group or I'm leaving this room, but they withdraw into themselves. They withdraw into this reflection, like I was saying before. And for a four whose focus is on being special or standing out or being unique and authentic, what they withdraw into is that sort of picture they have of themselves as being apart from the rest and somehow distinguished from the rest. Not necessarily better than. It's not like that. It's really much more about uniqueness and authenticity. A five withdraws into their mind. And I find that to be the most easy one to understand or explain. A five is really focused on security. And the way that they get that security is by that preparedness, gathering and organizing and synthesizing information. So they withdraw into their incredible intellect in order to give themselves that sense of preparedness and competency. And fives really prefer to be the observer in most social situations. Sometimes fives can feel socially awkward or uncomfortable or confused. And so being on the outside and just observing and almost like looking at those interactions as a academic exercise feels a lot less scary. And so that withdrawing, that putting themselves into that observer and academic stance helps them so much more to feel safe and secure than if they were, you know, going after or participating in that way. So that's that sort of reflection and withdrawing. Nines withdraw into their sort of like inner sanctum because peace is the most important thing to a nine. Peacefulness, tranquility, the minimal level of disruption and conflict, etc. So nines withdraw into that sense of inner security, inner peace, to feel that sense of control and maintenance of that peaceful tranquility. And of all of the types, nines are the most capable of actually remaining present to a situation, but withdrawing mentally to preserve that inner peace. That inner peace is available to them even when they are present in a conflict by withdrawing mentally and withdrawing into that sort of like inner peaceful sanctum that they have. The third stance is that against, assertive, aggressive. Sometimes it's just called the at. So that first stance was to, second was away, third is at, toward, away, or at. Can be compliant, withdrawn, assertive. And this assertive stance is also sometimes called the aggressive stance. And that's numbers 7, 8, and 3. And how they get what they want is by going after it, taking it. Threes are aggressive in their goals in order to get that recognition or attention for being successful and being, pleasing in terms of impressing people and things like that. So threes are aggressive in going after their goals. Sevens are aggressive in going after their desires, what they want, that sense of freedom and full experience of the world and enjoyment and fun and avoiding pain and all of that stuff. That gives them a sense of security. The more that they have their desires met, the more they feel secure. And so they really will go after those things that seem fun and interesting and pleasurable to them in very aggressive ways. Sometimes it can look like you know, getting away from like giving up on a goal that maybe is causing them a lot of discomfort, or a relationship that's causing them discomfort, or just really trying to get the group to go in the direction of fun and like, let's keep it light and that kind of stuff. They have a very sort of strong energy around them when it comes to that stuff. Eights are aggressive in their strength and their power in order to gain control. So eights of the whole Enneagram would, in my opinion, come off often as the strongest and the most aggressive, the most dominant and domineering sometimes. And eight is what my mom is. So we've gone through the whole gamut. I'm a one, my mom is an eight. We've gone through all the types at this point. Now imagine the relationship dynamic between two people who both want autonomy and self-reliance because both of us are in the gut triad. And one of which is all about following the rules and being compliant in order to get that self-reliance, and one who's all about just taking what they want in order to get that feeling of control and self-reliance. You can imagine how we have had so many interactions where I feel, totally bulldozed. Meanwhile, my mom feels really confused why did this situation even go sideways, or what's the problem? I want this thing, so I'm going to take this thing. What's the big deal? Meanwhile, I'm sitting there going, that's not right. We need to follow the rules. It's not okay to be in someone else's house and do X, Y, and Z. The first year that we were in the house, my mom, you know, put up all of these yard decorations all around my yard that I didn't like. And she didn't ask me beforehand, and she didn't think anything of it. She was just like, this is how I want to decorate my yard. I'm just going to do it. Makes perfect sense, right? And in doing that, not only did she just do it because she wanted to, it gives her a sense of control and ownership over the house, which is really important to her, because when she feels out of control or when she feels overpowered, it's very dysregulating to her. It makes perfect sense that she did what she did. And my reaction to it was, you don't just go into someone else's house and put your decorations all over their yard. That's not how the rules work. And we had an epic, probably one of the biggest blowout arguments in my adult life anyways, over yard decorations, because I felt that she was not following the rules and she was taking away my self-reliance and my control over my own home. And she felt like I was trying to overpower her, and it was absolutely dysregulating to her. And, we had like the fight of the century over flamingo decorations in my backyard. So you can see how, knowing these stances, does this make it so that my mom and I never have disagreements anymore? Definitely not. But I am able to at least look at that situation and realize, okay, well, I see what I'm bringing to the table. And knowing my mom's type, I also can understand what she's bringing to the table. I can understand how we got where we are. And as I do my growth work, I can also understand how we might be able to show up better in our relationship with each other, how I might be able to, honor my mom's need for control and not be reactive when I see her doing those things, because I understand where it's coming from. And maybe give my mom a little bit of choice and agency, because, like, do I really need to be in control of every single aspect of the house, even though, yes, it is my house? These kinds of things are so much more available to me when I am aware of my style and my mom's style. And it also helps me so much in relationships where I have no idea who the other person is or what their personality is. When I start to feel that feeling of like, why is it so impossible for me to thread this needle? It's probably because I am trying to use this whole rule following strategy in order to be in this like compliance stance while still getting what I want. And sometimes that's not actually the most effective way to take care of myself. Sometimes I do just need to be assertive. And guess what? When I am assertive with my mom, when instead of me being sort of like all like tying myself in knots to please her, at the same time I give myself what I want and all of those things, she reacts so much better. It's very challenging for me to get into that aggressive stance because it's not my normal way of being. It's not my normal way of being to be assertive in that way, even though probably if you knew me, you would say, you're pretty assertive, Anne. It's not my normal style to be aggressive and be okay with quote unquote breaking rules or displeasing people or being quote unquote selfish in order to get what I want. And I can't tell you, I have so many examples with my mom where, I was trying to please her while still getting what I wanted. And it created so much more conflict between the two of us than if I had just said, this is what I want. And the house is the greatest example of that, because even before, we started cohabitating in the house, when I decided to buy the house, I knew that my mom also wanted to use the house. And instead of being assertive and saying, Mom, I would like to own this house. Would you please be okay with stepping aside so that I can be the owner of this house and that will be my house? I was afraid to say that to her. And instead, I came up with this solution that was about threading the needle. I instead said, well, how about if I buy the house, but you can stay in the house whenever you want to? Because I wanted to please her. I wanted it to be this like cooperative, compliant, as a dutiful daughter, am I going to say, I want this thing and you can't have it? No, that's disrespectful to your mother. And so instead, I came up with this cockamamie, compromise situation with my mom that has caused all of these challenges down the road. And it all came from the fact that I was in my compliant stance and not able to access my assertive aggressiveness and just say, here's what I want, and I want you to give it to me. I couldn't do that. And I have like sort of reaped what I've sown for 5 years now in my situation in that house. And I bet if you are a person in that compliant stance, if you're a 1, 2, or a 6, you can probably think of lots of situations where you've gotten yourself into a big pickle because you were, I'm going to not mince words here. You were too chicken to just stay, I want this and I'm going to take it. And that's not the best stance to take all of the time, because I can tell you conversely, my mom has found herself in many pickles by being, this is what I want and I'm going to take it. And I don't really care what the fallout is from that. That's not the best stance to have all the time either. And there are many times where it would have been better for me to take a step back and reflect on the situation before I, engaged in it, or just sit and listen when someone is talking to me, or go, kind of remove myself from the situation and take some time. And I didn't do that. All of these stances have amazing benefits. And just like I talked about when we were talking about the three triads, how there's this fourth way where we access all of our centers of wisdom. There is also a fourth way when it comes to the stances. We all have the ability to get into an assertive stance, even if that's not our default mode, or take some time and withdraw and reflect even if that's not our default mode. And this example of this vacation home that we have in Michigan is such a great example of, man, if I had just taken some time and withdrawn from the situation and taken some time to reflect and then come back to my mom in an assertive, aggressive way, the situation may have turned out so much better for all of us, not just me. Because the truth is, cohabitating with me in the summer isn't just hard for me. It's a really, really challenging situation for my mom. And if I had been clearer with her in the beginning, it probably wouldn't be so brain breaking to her. And, being able to access all three of those stances would have been a tremendous gift to everyone in our entire family. And, as I'm thinking this through and I'm talking about it, there's also another example of how my sister, who is a 7, so she also has an against stance, does so much better with my mother than I do. She has no problem just telling my mom, like, hey, this is what's going on. And, I'm sorry if you're upset about it, but that's the way it is. Oh my gosh, that is torture for me. And another example, a couple years ago, we had a family wedding that my sister and my mom and I all went to. And afterwards, my sister and I wanted to go and off and do kind of like a second trip that was, just for the sisters. And my mom was hurt that we didn't include her in that, which is perfectly fair and justifiable. And I knew she was going to be hurt. And so did my sister. And before we ever even approached the situation, the two of us agreed, okay, when mom gets her feelings hurt, you're going to be the one who talks to her because she handles it so much better when she gets information from you, and you handle it so much better when you're the one who's giving the information. And if it had come from me, I would have done the same thing. I would have been doing this namby-pamby, tying myself in knots, and wound up explaining this thing to my mom in a way that hurt her even more deeply, because eights have the highest bullshit meter on the Enneagram. And as soon as you are sort of mincing your words and fumbling all over yourself around an eight, they know, and they're not wrong, they're right. They know that you are skirting an issue, or there's something that you're not saying, or, they feel that you are deceiving them and taking advantage of them, which you are kind of. But it's so hard for me to be direct with my mom that we strategized right from the beginning. Like, probably mom is going to be disappointed that she's not invited to this half of the trip. And when that happens, it's going to be better for everyone if my sister is the one who tells her that, because she does so much better at using that, meeting my mom in her aggressive, her assertive stance. And that way, first of all, the issue is resolved much more quickly. But second of all, my mom doesn't feel that sense of, um, being deceived or played, because she's getting that direct communication, which is exactly what she needs. So I hope this is really illustrating to you like how useful this stuff is. It doesn't matter if you remember every single thing that I've said in this podcast. And by the way, it's recorded, so you can go back and listen to it again. What matters is that you start to see potential for change and growth and understanding. My relationship with my mom has been fraught almost my entire life. And it probably will never be, some idyllic, fantasy, which by the way, no relationships ever will be. But my ability to learn these things and understand my mom and at least grow to have access to different ways of being with her means that we still have potential for things to be better, and that our relationship still exists. Because I can tell you there are many people who are in similar dynamics with their parents as my mom and I are, and they just simply don't have relationships with their parents anymore. I see this happening all the time with people my age and their adult, and their older parents. And I also see us as parents doing our absolute best to make sure that doesn't happen with our kids. Like, at the same time that I have all this tension between me and my mom, it would break my heart to imagine that possibility happening between me and my kids, even though that possibility is absolutely out there and it absolutely could happen. But I really see the Enneagram as one of those tools that helps minimize those possibilities and maximize the potential that relationships can be healed and whole. And that is absolutely my mission in life, in my work with my clients, in my life as a mother. My relationships with my children are the most important things in my life. And I bring all of my knowledge and learning to trying to do my absolute best in those relationships. And the Enneagram is a tool that helps me get there. So if this is like, holy cow, my mind is being blown, or, oh my gosh, this seems really interesting, but it's like way over my head, any of that stuff, if you are feeling drawn to learning more about this stuff, please sign up for the workshop on the 26th. You have a chance to go deep with this stuff so that it doesn't feel overwhelming anymore. Remember what I said in the beginning of today's episode is, these episodes are sort of like giving you a sampler platter of all of the little areas of study and pieces of information that are available to you with the Enneagram. It's that sort of broad, but not deep overview. On the 26th, we are going to narrow that focus. We're not going to get distracted with the stances or the instincts or the centers of intelligence necessarily. We are going to stay into this narrow range of focus where we talk about you, what you are going through, what you experience, what it's like to live inside your head. Why is it like that? And what do you want to do about it? And it becomes quite simple at the same time that the world is just like opening up to you. So join me on the 26th. Remember bit.ly/living Enneagram. I can't wait to see you. And if you are not local or if you are not available on the 26th, remember that Enneagram work is always available to you with me through coaching. So set up at that free discovery call. Tell me that you want to use it for your Enneagram work. And that's where we're going to go with our time and talk about where you're at right now, where you want to go, and what is possible for you. Have a great week, everybody, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.